Hey guys, tonight we're going to dim the lights and drift back in time. Not to the grand ballrooms or the opulent drawing rooms you might imagine, but to a very different kind of existence. Forget the glittering chandeliers and the rustling silk gowns of the Victorian era. Tonight, we're slipping behind the velvet ropes, down the back stairs, and into a world of relentless, unyielding labor. We're going to explore what it truly meant to live the miserable life of a servant in a Victorian manor. You might think you know what hard work is, but trust me, after tonight, your earliest morning alarm will feel like a gentle lullaby. You'll probably decide you wouldn't last a week. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from tonight, and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Imagine yourself waking up, not to the gentle chime of your phone, or the slow, creeping light of a modern American city like Portland, Oregon, but to the distant, insistent clang of a bell. It's not a pleasant sound, it's a call to arms, a brutal summons that rips you from the shallow depths of your sleep long before the sun even considers gracing the horizon. Perhaps it's 5 a.m. or even earlier, in the deep chill of a Massachusetts winter, or the oppressive humidity of a Virginia summer. This isn't a suggestion, it's an order, echoing through the cramped, dimly lit corridors of the servants' quarters below stairs. Your sleep, already fitful and brief, is over. Your day of endless toil has begun. This is the pervasive, inescapable reality of the unseen army. Endless toil, where your very existence is defined by a relentless cycle of tasks, performed in the shadows, far from the gilded cages of your employers. You're a housemaid, perhaps, or a footman, in a grand manor house that might sit nestled in the rolling hills of upstate New York, or commanding a view over the sprawling vineyards of Napa Valley. California. From the outside, it looks magnificent, a symbol of wealth and refined living. But inside, for you, it's a factory of labor, a relentless machine that demands every ounce of your physical and mental energy. The immediate tasks are always the same: get dressed quickly in your drab, often worn uniform, splash some icy water on your face, and then there's no time for proper washing, let alone a hot shower like the one you might take this morning in your comfortable apartment in Austin, Texas. Then you're off, scurrying through narrow, unheated passages, your footsteps barely audible. For silence is not just a courtesy, it's an absolute requirement. Your first duty is often to light the fires. Imagine the chill of a Victorian morning, the kind that bites at your fingers and toes, especially in a grand, drafty house. You kneel before cold hearths in drawing rooms, dining rooms, and master bedrooms, carefully laying kindling, striking matches, and coaxing reluctant flames to life. This isn't a quick task. It requires patience and skill, and often you're covered in soot and ash before the first bell for the family's breakfast has even rung. You must ensure the fires are roaring, casting a comforting warmth before your employers even stir from their plush 4-poster beds. And as you tend these flames, you can't help but think about how they bring warmth to others, while the chill of your own quarters lingers. A subtle, everyday injustice. It's a bit like being a furnace operator for a luxury cruise ship, keeping everyone else toasty while you toil away in the sweltering depths. A truly thankless endeavor. Once the fires are ablaze, the real work begins. If you're a housemaid, you might then move on to cleaning grates, sweeping vast carpets, or polishing endless pieces of silver and brass. Every surface must gleam, every speck of dust eradicated. You carry heavy buckets of water, scrub on your hands and knees, and tirelessly rub at tarnished metals until your arms ache and your fingers are raw. There are no vacuum cleaners, no electric polishers, no dishwashers like the convenient appliances that hum softly in your kitchen in a suburban home in Atlanta, Georgia. All work is done by hand, with simple brushes, cloths, and harsh cleaning agents that leave your skin chapped and irritated. The sheer repetitive nature of the tasks is mind-numbing. You perform the same motions day after day, week after week, with little variation. If you're a footman, your day might involve polishing shoes, carrying heavy trays, running errands, or standing stiffly at attention for hours, ready to anticipate every whim of your master or mistress. Your uniform, while seemingly smart, is restrictive, and your posture must be impeccable. You are part of the scenery, an extension of the house's grandeur, yet you are meant to be entirely invisible, present but not noticed. The constant physical demand, combined with the rigid expectation of decorum, creates a unique kind of strain. You are a human automaton, performing precise movements for the convenience of others. You might feel a faint pang of resentment as you carry a lavish breakfast tray to a master who barely glances at you, lost in their morning newspaper, utterly oblivious to the miles you've already walked and the grime you've already scrubbed away before they've even had their first cup of tea. It's like being a highly skilled, yet utterly unacknowledged background extra in an endless play, where you never get to speak a line. A common historical truth is that the Victorian era saw an immense expansion in domestic service, driven by the rising middle classes and a desire to emulate aristocratic lifestyles, leading to a massive demand for servants. However, despite the numbers, the living and working conditions for these unseen armies were often arduous, reflecting a societal paradox where increasing wealth for some led to increasing, often invisible, hardship for many others. Historians still widely debate the precise psychological toll of such unrelenting, often thankless, labor on the individual mental well-being of servants. As personal diaries and intimate reflections from this class are exceedingly rare, leaving much to interpretation about their inner lives beyond the public facade of duty, the day progresses in a relentless cycle of bells and tasks. The breakfast bell rings, then the luncheon bell, then the afternoon tea bell, and finally, the dinner bell. Each signal means a new flurry of activity. Meals must be prepared, served, and cleared. Dishes must be washed, silver polished again, and the dining room reset. You might be serving a grand dinner party, where dozens of guests fill the house with laughter and conversation, while you silently ferry plates back and forth, listening to snippets of their lives, so far removed from your own. The aroma of rich foods, often forbidden to you, wafts tantalizingly from the kitchen, a constant reminder of the disparity between your world and theirs. You are always working for them, never with them, and certainly never as them. The evenings bring no respite. While the family retires to their drawing rooms for cards and conversation, you are still busy. Fires need tending, lights need snuffing out, clothes need pressing for the next day, and preparations for the morning's early start must be made. You might be up until midnight, or even later, depending on the social calendar of the house. A late-night party means even more work as you stay on your feet, serving drinks, clearing away dishes, and then, after the last guest has departed, beginning the monumental task of cleaning up the aftermath. The house, after a night of revelry, feels heavy with discarded finery, spilled champagne, and the lingering scent of tobacco, all of which you must painstakingly erase before the next day dawns. A fascinating yet rarely discussed detail about the unseen army. Endless toil is the curious phenomenon of silent running, where the most experienced and valued servants developed an almost supernatural ability to move through the house, performing their duties without making a single sound. This skill, honed over years of practice, was not just about being polite, it was a survival mechanism, as any perceived noise could lead to harsh reprimands or even dismissal, turning their very movements into a silent, demanding performance. Imagine yourself a nervous new scullery maid, trying to navigate the creaking back stairs of a vast and echoing manor in upstate New York without letting a single plate clatter. Your every muscle tensed, knowing that one wrong sound could mean a harsh tongue lashing from the formidable housekeeper, or even the loss of your precious, meager livelihood. It's like being a ninja, but instead of stealth for combat, it's stealth for scrubbing floors. It truly sucked to realize your silence was as valuable as your labor, turning every step into a calculated risk. The sheer physical exhaustion is constant. Your feet ache from standing and walking on hard floors for 14, 16, sometimes 18 hours a day. Your back is perpetually sore from bending, lifting, and scrubbing. Your hands, exposed to harsh chemicals and constant labor, are rough, chapped, and often bleeding from small cuts. There's no concept of ergonomic tools, no breaks for stretching, no union advocating for better working conditions. You are expected to perform relentlessly, regardless of your physical state. Minor injuries, a cut from a broken dish, a burn from a hot stove, a splinter from a wooden floor, are common and often ignored, as there's no time for proper care, and certainly no sick leave like the paid time off you might receive from your employer in a modern American company in San Francisco. California. These small injuries, if left untreated, can fester and turn into serious infections, a silent, creeping danger. The mental toll is equally heavy. The monotony of the tasks, the lack of personal freedom, and the constant need to be deferential take a toll on your spirit. You are constantly under scrutiny, observed by both your superiors among the staff, the formidable butler or housekeeper, and implicitly by the family themselves. Every gesture, every facial expression must be carefully controlled. You cannot show fatigue, cannot betray boredom, cannot express frustration. Your public persona is one of quiet efficiency and unwavering obedience. This constant emotional suppression is draining, leaving you with little energy for personal thought or genuine connection. You are defined by your uniform, your duties, and your place in the rigid hierarchy, rather than by your individuality. When you finally get to rest, it's not for long. Perhaps you share a cramped room with several other servants, a small, unheated space with thin mattresses and inadequate bedding. The air might be stale, the sounds of your sleeping comrades constant. Your precious few hours of sleep are rarely restorative. You fall into a deep, exhausted slumber, only to be ripped from it by that dreaded bell, ready to begin the cycle anew. The dream of a good night's sleep, the kind you enjoy in your quiet suburban bedroom in Phoenix, Arizona, remains just that, a dream. The pervasive exhaustion and mental strain aren't just uncomfortable. They are insidious enemies that weaken your body and mind. Your immune system, constantly under duress from lack of sleep and poor nutrition, a hint of what's to come in a later chapter, is compromised. You become more susceptible to every passing cough, every cold, every disease that sweeps through the close quarters of the manor. A simple ailment that a well-fed, well-rested person might shake off in a day or two can drag on for weeks, debilitating you, making you even less efficient, and putting your tenuous employment at risk. It's a vicious cycle where the very act of surviving makes you more vulnerable to the next threat. The life of a Victorian servant, therefore, what was a relentless, grinding existence, far from the romanticized images often presented. It was a life defined by unending labor, physical discomfort, and pervasive emotional repression. The unseen army, toiling below stairs, kept the grand houses running, but at an immense personal cost. A stark contrast to the modern service industry worker who benefits from labor laws, minimum wage, and often benefits. Whether they are a barista in Seattle, Washington, or a hotel concierge in Las Vegas, Nevada, their toil, though hidden, was the very foundation upon which the glittering edifice of Victorian high society rested. It's a testament to human endurance, and a somber reminder of the vast inequalities that underpinned an entire era. Let's gently return from the relentless, grinding toil of the unseen army endless toil, where we saw how every hour of a servant's day was consumed by unending tasks, often performed in the shadows. If Chapter 1 explored the what of their labor, tonight we'll delve into the where, the hidden, often suffocating spaces they called home. We're going to explore the grim reality of below-stairs confines cramped quarters, where privacy was an unimaginable luxury, fresh air a distant dream, and the very air you breathed often carried the seeds of illness. Imagine yourself, now, a scullery maid, perhaps, or a lowly boot boy, living in a vast, opulent Victorian manor that might sit majestically on a hill overlooking the Hudson River in New York, or grandly dominating the skyline of a burgeoning city like Boston, Massachusetts. From the outside, the house radiates wealth and splendor, its windows gleaming, its facade imposing. But your world exists entirely in its underbelly, far from the sunlit drawing rooms and sumptuous bedrooms above. This is the pervasive, claustrophobic reality of below-stairs, confines cramped quarters, where your living space is not a home, but merely a designated storage area for human labor, a forgotten corner of a sprawling machine. You descend the back stairs, perhaps late at night after a grueling day of endless scrubbing and polishing. The elegant staircase the family uses, with its polished banisters and plush carpets, is a world away. These stairs are narrow, steep, and often unlit, leading deeper and deeper into the bowels of the house. The air grows noticeably cooler, damper, and often carries a faint, unpleasant smell, a mixture of coal dust, stale cooking odors, damp stone, and the lingering scent of unwashed bodies. There's no central heating down here, no soft glow of electric lights like the comforting illumination of your own bedroom tonight in suburban Maryland. Only the flickering flame of a tallow candle, if you're lucky enough to have one, illuminates the oppressive darkness. Your room, if it can even be called that, is likely a tiny alcove carved out of a cellar, or a narrow space under the eaves in the attic, far from the main house's amenities. It might be shared with 2, 3, or even more other servants, often crammed together into a space barely large enough for one. Imagine a room no bigger than a small walk-in closet, with 2 or 3 narrow, lumpy beds or straw mattresses pushed against the walls. There's no space for personal belongings beyond a small wooden chest, if you even possess one. Your meager possessions are carefully folded and tucked away, for every inch of space is precious. Privacy is an alien concept. You sleep, dress, and exist in full view of your comrades, sharing every whisper, every sigh, every cough. It's like living in a perpetually crowded, dimly lit dormitory, where even your dreams feel overheard. A constant invasion of your personal space that would make even the most seasoned modern city dweller in a tiny New York City apartment feel utterly claustrophobic. The conditions are not just cramped, they are often appalling. Ventilation is poor, especially in the cellar rooms. The air is stagnant, thick with the exhalations of multiple bodies, the dust from daily chores, and whatever fumes might seep in from the nearby kitchens or coal cellars. There are no windows in many of these rooms, or if there are, they are small, high-set, and rarely opened. The dampness from the stone walls or leaky roofs permeates everything, leading to a constant chill that settles deep in your bones, especially during the bitter winters of the American Northeast. Mold might grow unseen in corners, adding a musty odor to the already stale air. Cleanliness, while a paramount duty for the upstairs areas, is often neglected below stairs. The servants' quarters are usually the last to be cleaned, and often by the servants themselves, after their exhausting duties for the family are complete. Water for washing is scarce and often cold. There's no running water in most of these rooms. No private sinks or commodes. You share a communal basin, perhaps in a dingy hallway, or you rely on buckets of cold water brought from a pump in the yard. Proper bathing is a rare luxury, often only possible in a shared tub, infrequently filled, leaving you feeling perpetually grimy despite your efforts. It's a bit like trying to keep a submarine sparkling clean when all you have is a bucket and a sponge, and the water keeps leaking in. A common historical truth is that Victorian-era servants, regardless of the opulence of the manor they served, typically lived in cramped, often unsanitary conditions below stairs, reflecting a deliberate separation between the visible grandeur of the family's world and the hidden, utilitarian existence of their staff. These living conditions were a significant factor in the high rates of disease among servants. Historians still widely debate the precise psychological impact of such profound lack of privacy and personal space on the individual well-being and sense of self among Victorian servants, as direct testimonies detailing these intimate struggles are scarce. Forcing scholars to rely on indirect evidence and social commentary, the lack of proper sanitation for personal needs is another grim reality. There are no private toilets like the convenient porcelain fixture in your bathroom tonight in your comfortable home in suburban Seattle. Washington. Servants might share a single rudimentary privy in the yard, or use chamber pots that are emptied infrequently, contributing to the pervasive stench and unhygienic conditions. The proximity of these facilities to living and eating areas further contributes to the spread of disease, a constant invisible threat that lingers in the very air you breathe. The very definition of below stairs often included the necessary but unsavory spaces like laundries, sculleries, and pantries, all of which contributed their own unique odors and potential for dampness and grime, making the air heavy and unappealing. Pests are an unavoidable part of life below stairs. Mice and rats scurry through the walls, seeking crumbs and warmth. Lice and fleas are common companions, living in your hair, your clothes, and your bedding, causing relentless itching and discomfort. There's little you can do to truly eradicate them, as they are a constant presence in a house built on outdated sanitation and bustling with human and animal traffic. Imagine trying to get a decent night's sleep when you're constantly scratching, or when the faint skittering of tiny feet above your head is a nightly lullaby. It's a constant, irritating battle against unseen adversaries, worse than a summer camping trip gone wrong with too many mosquitoes. Beyond the physical discomfort, the lack of privacy is emotionally draining. You are never truly alone. Every conversation, every private moment, is potentially overheard by a roommate or a passing colleague. There's no space to reflect, to mourn, to simply be yourself away from the scrutinizing gaze of others. This constant lack of personal space erodes your sense of individuality and makes it difficult to maintain personal boundaries. You are merely one cog in the great machine of the house, and your living space reflects that utilitarian view. It's a bit like living in a reality TV show house, where cameras are always rolling but without the fame or the prize money. A fascinating yet rarely discussed detail about below-stairs confines. Cramped quarters is the curious phenomenon of shared bed-warming rituals, where, in particularly cold manners, servants would take turns warming a bed for the next shift, often by simply lying in it themselves for a short period before another servant took their place. A desperate, yet oddly communal attempt to mitigate the brutal chill of unheated sleeping quarters, turning a moment of rest into a continuous, unspoken relay race against the cold. Imagine yourself, shivering, waiting your turn for the meager warmth left by the last body in a thin, lumpy mattress in the frigid attic of a grand estate in rural Maine. A silent, almost animalistic instinct for survival, overriding any sense of personal space. A truly grim form of shared comfort. It truly sucked to rely on someone else's body heat for your only source of warmth, turning your slumber into a shared misery. The psychological toll of these cramped, unsanitary conditions is profound. The constant lack of personal space, the pervasive odors, the itching from pests, and the gnawing chill contribute to a persistent sense of discomfort and despair. Your ability to truly relax and recharge after a long day is severely hampered. This chronic stress and physical discomfort directly impact your overall health, weakening your immune system and making you even more vulnerable to the diseases that inevitably spread through such close, unhygienic quarters. The cycle is self-reinforcing. Poor living conditions lead to sickness, which leads to reduced work capacity, which can lead to reprimands or even dismissal. Leaving you utterly destitute, the lack of natural light, especially in those basement rooms, exacerbates the physical and mental strain. Constant artificial light from dim candles or oil lamps strains your eyes. The absence of sunlight impacts your mood and your body's natural rhythms, contributing to a pervasive sense of gloom. It's like living in a perpetual twilight, where the outside world feels distant and inaccessible. A stark contrast to the sun-drenched rooms and outdoor adventures you might experience on a summer day in California. Even the furniture, if you can call it that, is rudimentary. Simple wooden frames, thin mattresses, and scratchy blankets offer little comfort. There are no cozy armchairs, no bedside tables, no personal lamps for reading like the ones that adorn your modern bedroom in your comfortable home in Denver. Colorado. Every item in the servants' quarters is purely functional, designed to provide the bare minimum for survival, rather than any semblance of comfort or individuality. The living conditions below stairs were not simply an oversight, they were a deliberate reflection of the rigid class structure of the Victorian era. The comfort and health of the family were paramount, while the well-being of the servants, though essential to the functioning of the house, was considered secondary or even irrelevant. Their miserable living conditions were simply part of the cost of employing a cheap, ever-present labor force. This profound inequality permeated every aspect of their lives, making their home not a sanctuary, but just another extension of their arduous, thankless work. So, as you settle into your own comfortable bed tonight, surrounded by the quiet privacy of your modern home, take a moment to appreciate the sheer luxury of your space, the clean air, the warmth, the running water, the personal bathroom. These are not just conveniences. They are the hard-won victories over centuries of human suffering, many of which unfolded in the cramped, unseen confines of places just like the Victorian Manor. Far removed from the bustling streets of cities like Chicago, Illinois, or the serene landscapes of the Great Smoky Mountains. National Park in Tennessee. The unseen world of the servant below stairs, with its pervasive discomfort and lack of dignity, played a crucial role in shaping the very standards of comfort and hygiene we now take for granted. Let's gently return from the suffocating, cramped world of below-stairs confines. Cramped quarters, where privacy was non-existent and the air was thick with the scent of damp and despair. If Chapter 2 explored the physical spaces of servitude, tonight we'll delve into the invisible chains that bound every servant, the rigid, unspoken rules that governed their very existence. We're going to explore the chilling reality of the silent service strict hierarchy, where every glance, every word, and every movement was meticulously choreographed. Turning social interaction into a perilous dance of deference and unspoken fear, imagine yourself now, a young housemaid, perhaps no more than 16 years old, having just arrived from a small farm town in rural Iowa, or a quiet fishing village on the coast of Maine. You stand bewildered in the vast, echoing kitchen of a grand Victorian manor in Newport, Rhode Island, or a stately home nestled in the heart of San Francisco, California. You've never encountered such formality, such an intricate web of unspoken rules. Your new life is not simply about doing tasks, it's about being a certain way, about existing within a meticulously constructed social pyramid where every single person knows their place. And deviation from that place means swift, often brutal, consequences. This is the pervasive, stifling reality of the silent service strict hierarchy, where your individuality is stripped away, and your worth is defined solely by your obedience to an invisible, omnipresent pecking order. At the very top of the servant hierarchy, holding immense power, sits the butler for the men and the housekeeper for the women. These are formidable figures, often decades older than you, with years of experience and a keen eye for every transgression. The butler, a dignified man, is often responsible for the wine cellar, the plate, and the footman, his word law among the male staff. The housekeeper, a stern woman with a jingling set of keys at her waist, oversees all the female servants, managing their duties, their conduct, and their meager rations. Their authority is absolute, their disapproval a chilling prospect. A stern glance from the housekeeper, a curt word from the butler, can send shivers down your spine, far more effective than any shouted command. You learn quickly that their judgment can make or break your fragile career, determining whether you stay or are sent packing with nowhere to go. It's like being a raw recruit in a highly disciplined military unit, where the drill sergeant's gaze is always upon you, waiting for a single misstep, a truly terrifying initiation into a new world. Beneath the butler and housekeeper are their immediate subordinates, the valet to the master, and the lady's maid to the mistress. These servants enjoy a privileged position, often having direct, intimate access to the family. They dress their employers, style their hair, and attend to their personal needs, privy to conversations and secrets that no other servant would ever hear. Their status is almost honorary, blurring the lines between servant and confidant. Yet they are still servants, always aware of the insurmountable social chasm that separates them from their employers. Their very existence is dependent on the whims of their master or mistress, a precarious balance of power and subservience. Then come the specialized, often skilled. Servants. The cook, ruling her domain in the hot, chaotic kitchen, wielding immense power over the daily meals and the scullery maids who scrub her pots. The coachman caring for the horses and carriages, a position of some prestige among the outdoor staff. The gardener, meticulously tending the expansive grounds. Each has their own realm, their own rules, and their own subordinates, creating a complex web of overlapping authorities and rivalries. A mistake made by a scullery maid in the kitchen could result in a sharp reprimand from the cook, potentially escalated to the housekeeper, creating a ripple effect of disapproval throughout the entire below-stairs ecosystem. And then there's you, a mere housemaid or footman, near the bottom of this immense pyramid. Your direct superior might be a head housemaid or a first footman, who in turn answers to the housekeeper or butler. You are at the mercy of multiple layers of authority, each capable of punishing you for the slightest infraction. An unpolished shoe, a dusty corner missed, a teacup placed incorrectly. Any of these can lead to a lecture, a reduction in your meager privileges, or even a threat of dismissal. You learn to anticipate, to observe, to be constantly aware of what is expected. For there is no manual, only observation and the harsh lessons of experience. It's like being a new intern in a massive, cutthroat corporation, where every tiny mistake can feel like a career-ending blunder. But without the benefit of a clear HR policy, a common historical truth is that the elaborate hierarchy among Victorian servants was not simply a matter of organization, but a reflection of the era's rigid class structure, where every individual, regardless of their social standing, was expected to occupy a specific, well-defined place within society. This intricate system served to maintain order and control within the domestic sphere, often at the cost of individual autonomy and dignity for those at the bottom. Historians still widely debate the precise psychological effects of such rigid social stratification on the sense of personal identity and self-worth among Victorian servants, as many historical accounts focus more on the external mechanics of the hierarchy rather than the internal experiences of those living within it, leaving much room for empathetic interpretation. The strict hierarchy extends beyond tasks to every aspect of your daily life. You eat in a separate dining hall, if one exists, or in the kitchen, always after the family has been served, and often after the senior staff have eaten their fill. You cannot speak unless spoken to, especially not to the family, and certainly not about anything personal. Your opinions are irrelevant, your voice unheard. When the family passes, you must lower your gaze, step aside, or curtsy bow in deference. You are meant to be invisible, a ghost in the background, a silent performer in the grand theater of their lives. This constant need for deference, this perpetual self-effacement, is profoundly dehumanizing. You learn to suppress your natural impulses, to bite your tongue, to swallow your pride, and to become an automaton of service. Communication within the servant hierarchy is often terse and formal. Orders are given, not requested. Questions are answered, not debated. Gossip, while rampant in hushed whispers among junior staff, is a dangerous game, for any hint of disloyalty or disrespect can quickly lead to severe consequences. The butler or housekeeper often acts as the family's eyes and ears below stairs, creating an atmosphere of constant surveillance, a chilling reminder that you are always being watched, always being judged. It's a bit like living in a perpetual surveillance state, where the walls have ears and every conversation is a potential trap. The uniforms you wear are another symbol of this rigid hierarchy. Each type of servant has a specific uniform, clearly delineating their role and status. A footman's livery, meticulously pressed and adorned, might appear grand, but it is a uniform, not a choice. A housemaid's simple dark dress with a white apron and cap, while practical, erases her individuality. You are identified by your uniform, not by your name, a visual representation of your subservience, a constant reminder of your place. There's no freedom of expression in your attire, no personal style like the endless fashion choices you might have in a modern department store in Dallas. Texas, a fascinating yet rarely discussed detail about the silent service strict hierarchy is the curious phenomenon of the servant silent signal network. A complex, unwritten code of subtle glances, hushed coughs, specific ways of placing objects, or even the discreet tapping of a bell, used by senior servants to communicate urgent messages or warnings across the house without alerting the family. Turning daily chores into a silent ballet of coded information, designed to maintain efficiency and often protect junior staff from the family's wrath. Imagine yourself, a nervous junior footman in a grand mansion, overlooking the sparkling lights of Lake Tahoe, Nevada, frantically trying to decipher whether the butler's seemingly casual adjustment of his waistcoat means the master is about to demand something impossible, or if the head housemaid's faint, deliberate cough indicates that the mistress is unexpectedly heading towards the drawing room. It's like being part of an elaborate, real-time espionage ring. But instead of state secrets, you're communicating about whether the toast is ready. It truly sucked to have to master an entire secret language just to avoid getting fired. The emotional toll of living under such a strict hierarchy is immense. You are constantly required to suppress your emotions, to present a placid, agreeable demeanor, regardless of how you truly feel. Anger, frustration, sadness, even joy, all must be carefully masked. The idea of expressing a personal opinion or dissenting from an order is unthinkable. This constant emotional labor, this performance of subservience, is utterly draining. You live with a perpetual knot of anxiety in your stomach, fearing a misstep, a disapproving look, or a word that could cost you your livelihood. There's no space for genuine connection with the family, and often even among your fellow servants. True intimacy is guarded, as everyone is a potential informer in a system that thrives on control. Even your leisure time, if you get any, is governed by these rules. You might be allowed a few hours off on a Sunday, but you must be backed by a strict curfew. Your social circle is limited to other servants, and your movements are often restricted to the immediate vicinity of the manor. There's no freedom to explore, to simply be yourself in the wider world, like the easy independence you experience when driving down a highway in California. Your life is confined physically and socially by the unspoken strictures of your employment. The pervasive nature of this hierarchy meant that every new servant had to undergo a period of intense learning, often through harsh reprimands and public humiliation. You learned by watching, by mimicking, and by suffering the consequences of your mistakes. It was a brutal education, designed to break your spirit and mold you into the perfect, invisible servant. The goal was to erase your personal identity and replace it with your role within the household, turning you into a functional, obedient cog in the grand machinery of the manor. This strict social order wasn't unique to Victorian England. It mirrored the social structures of the time in America's wealthiest homes. From the grand estates of the Vanderbilts in New York to the sprawling plantations of the South, though with additional, darker layers of racial hierarchy in the latter. The underlying principle was the same: the maintenance of power and privilege through the precise control of those who served. The misery of this silent service, therefore, was not just about hard work. It was about the profound loss of autonomy, identity, and personal freedom. A chilling reminder of how social structures can dehumanize individuals, even in the absence of physical chains. So, as you lay in your own bed tonight, surrounded by the freedom to speak, to choose, and to simply be yourself, take a moment to reflect on the unseen lives lived under such oppressive, silent rules. The echoes of the silent service strict hierarchy might seem distant, but the very notion of respectful conduct, of professional boundaries, even of understanding unspoken social cues in modern workplaces, has roots in these intricate, often brutal historical structures. Rest well, knowing that your voice is your own, and your place in the world is determined by far more than a uniform or a rigid pecking order. Let's gently return from the suffocating, silent world of the silent service strict hierarchy, where every glance and every word was a calculated maneuver in a perilous dance of deference. If Chapter 3 explored the invisible chains of social order, tonight we'll delve into the very tangible, yet equally restrictive, chains of financial dependency. We're going to explore the disheartening reality of a penny for your thoughts, meager wages, where the endless toil and stifling rules were compensated by a pittance, barely enough to survive, and certainly not enough to dream of a life beyond service. Imagine yourself, now, having endured months, perhaps even years, in a grand Victorian Manor in Greenwich, Connecticut, or a sprawling ranch house in rural Montana. You've scrubbed countless floors, polished endless silver, endured the stern gazes of your superiors, and swallowed every personal slight. Your body aches from the unseen army, endless toil. Remember that constant physical strain from Chapter 1. And your spirit feels bruised from the relentless pressure of the silent service, the rigid hierarchy we discussed in Chapter 3. And for all this, what do you receive? A few shillings, perhaps a pound or two, tucked into your worn hand at the end of the quarter or the year. This is the pervasive, soul-crushing reality of a penny for your thoughts, meager wages, where your worth is reduced to a few paltry coins, barely enough to keep you from starvation, and certainly not enough to escape the cycle of servitude. Let's put this into perspective. For a young housemaid, fresh from a small town in Oklahoma or the farmlands of Nebraska, your annual wage might be as little as 8 to 14 pounds sterling. For a footman, perhaps 20 to 25 pounds. A formidable butler or housekeeper, at the very top of the servant hierarchy, might earn 50 to 100 pounds. A princely sum compared to your pittance, but still a fraction of the family's annual income. To illustrate, we imagine earning less than $500 a year in modern American money. If that for working 16-hour days, 7 days a week, with almost no time off. You might earn more in a single afternoon working at a fast food restaurant in Phoenix, Arizona, than a servant would earn in an entire month. But the actual cash wage is only part of the equation. Your compensation also includes your room and board. Sounds good, right? Free housing, free food. But as we discussed in Below Stairs Confines, cramped quarters, that grim reality from Chapter 2. Your room is likely a tiny, unheated shared space, often infested with pests. Your board consists of meager, monotonous, and often spoiled food, far from the balanced, nutritious meals you might expect from free accommodation. The value of this free lodging and sustenance is debatable, often barely meeting basic survival needs. It's like being promised a luxury suite in a 5-star hotel, only to find you're sleeping in the boiler room and eating stale bread from the dumpster. A truly misleading perk. The payment schedule itself adds to the financial precariousness. Wages were typically paid quarterly or even annually, not weekly or bi-weekly like your modern paycheck deposited into your bank account in Denver. Colorado. This meant you had to budget incredibly carefully, making your small allowance stretch over long periods. Any unexpected expense, a new pair of worn-out boots, a basic necessity, or perhaps a small gift for a distant family member back in rural Georgia, could throw your meager finances into disarray. You lived hand to mouth, constantly on the brink of destitution, always aware that one wrong step, one illness, one dismissal, could plunge you into utter poverty. There were also numerous deductions, breakages, lost items, or even minor infractions could result in a fine deducted directly from your already paltry wages. Imagine working an entire week, only to find a significant portion of your pay docked because you accidentally chipped a teacup, or were deemed insufficiently deferential by a demanding superior. These fines were arbitrary, often unfair, and served as another tool of control, ensuring your absolute compliance and dependence. It's like having your modern paycheck garnished for every minor mistake at work, without any due process. A truly oppressive system. A common historical truth is that domestic servants in the Victorian era typically received very low cash wages, often supplemented by room and board, which were themselves frequently of poor quality. This economic reality kept servants in a state of perpetual financial vulnerability and dependence on their employers, making it extremely difficult to save money or improve their social standing. Historians still widely debate the precise economic impact of the live-in servant system on the broader labor market and the development of working-class identities, as the lack of direct wage comparisons to other industries makes it challenging to quantify the true value and exploitation embedded within domestic service. The lack of financial independence had far-reaching consequences. You couldn't afford to be sick, because sick leave with pay was a foreign concept. If you were too ill to work, you might be sent home without pay, or even dismissed, leaving you with no income and no place to go. You couldn't afford to complain because finding another position was incredibly difficult, and a bad reference from a previous employer could blacklist you from future employment in the close-knit world of domestic service. Your survival literally depended on pleasing your employer and your senior staff. No matter the personal cost, savings were a dream for most, while some frugal servants, particularly those in senior positions like housekeepers, might manage to save enough over decades to open a small shop or retire. For the vast majority of junior staff, saving was an almost impossible feat. Every penny earned was often needed for basic necessities, or sent back home to support an ailing parent or younger siblings in a desperate attempt to alleviate their own family's poverty. The idea of accumulating wealth, or investing in property, or even building a nest egg for retirement, was a fantasy for most. You lived for today, with little hope for a significantly different tomorrow. A fascinating yet rarely discussed detail about a penny for your thoughts. Meager wages is the curious phenomenon of the servant's secret economy. A subtle, informal system of bartering, trading, or even discreetly selling leftover household items like candles, soap, or worn-out clothes among themselves or to local rag-and-bone men, allowing servants to supplement their meager incomes or acquire necessities without official permission, turning small acts of resourcefulness into a vital, hidden financial lifeline. Imagine yourself a resourceful kitchen maid in a sprawling estate in rural Virginia, discreetly bartering a handful of leftover candle stubs with the stable boy for some scraps of leather he found, knowing that these small, illicit transactions, a secret network of ingenuity, could mean the difference between having enough for a new pair of stockings or going without. A truly precarious form of entrepreneurship. It truly sucked to have to resort to such clandestine means just to make ends meet. Turning petty theft into a survival strategy, the lack of financial autonomy also meant a severe restriction on personal freedom. You couldn't simply quit a job you disliked, because finding another often required a strong reference, and unemployment meant immediate destitution. You were effectively tied to your employer, your daily existence a testament to economic bondage rather than willing service. This pervasive financial insecurity shaped every decision, every interaction, and every hope you might harbor. It was a constant, gnawing anxiety that underlined every waking moment. Far worse than worrying about your monthly budget in a comfortable modern life, consider the psychological impact. When your labor is devalued to such an extent, when your immense efforts are barely compensated, it can erode your sense of self-worth. you are a commodity, a cheap labor source, rather than an individual with aspirations and dignity. This feeling of being undervalued, combined with the constant physical demands and the oppressive social hierarchy, creates a profound sense of hopelessness. Why strive for more when the system is so rigidly designed to keep you in your place? This quiet despair, fueled by economic vulnerability, was a constant companion for millions of servants across the Victorian era. Even those who managed to save faced immense challenges. The few shillings tucked away in a small purse were vulnerable to theft, or to the inevitable demands of family back home. There were no secure bank accounts for the working poor, no reliable investments. Any small accumulation of wealth felt precarious, constantly threatened by unforeseen circumstances. The path to upward mobility was incredibly narrow, a treacherous climb against overwhelming odds. The enduring legacy of these meager wages and financial precarity is profound. It reminds us of a time when the vast majority of the population lived on the brink of poverty, and when human labor was valued at its barest minimum. It highlights the vast disparities of wealth that define the Victorian era, a stark contrast to the modern labor movement's fight for fair wages, benefits, and safer working conditions in places like Detroit, Michigan, or Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. The struggle for a living wage, for basic financial security, is a battle that continues in many parts of the world. But the foundation of our modern understanding of labor rights and economic dignity has roots in the grim realities faced by those who served for a penny for your thoughts. So, as you lay in your own bed tonight, perhaps thinking about your own financial plans, or simply enjoying the comfort of knowing you have a steady income, take a moment to reflect on the immense privilege that entails. The ability to save, to plan for the future, to make choices about your life not solely dictated by the fear of destitution. These are luxuries hard-won by generations who endured the crushing weight of economic insecurity. Rest well, knowing that your labor is valued, and your future holds far more possibilities than a mere penny for your thoughts. Let's gently return from the crushing weight of a penny for your thoughts. Meager wages, where every moment of toil was compensated by a mere pittance, tying servants to a life of perpetual financial vulnerability. If Chapter 4 explored the economic chains that bound them, tonight we'll delve into an even more fundamental and often overlooked aspect of their suffering, the very sustenance that was supposed to fuel their endless labor. We're going to explore the grim reality of the master's table scraps and scarcity, where the food provided to servants was frequently inadequate, monotonous, and often downright unappetizing, turning every meal into a grim calculation against hunger and illness. Imagine yourself, now, a kitchen maid, perhaps working in a bustling Victorian manor in Charleston, South Carolina, or a grand estate sprawling across the plains of Kansas. Above stairs, the family dines on multiple courses: roasted meats, delicate pastries, fresh vegetables, and imported fruits, all served on gleaming china. The aroma of their lavish meals often wafts tantalizingly down to your cramped, steamy workspace in the kitchen, a cruel reminder of the abundance you serve but rarely taste. This is the pervasive, often gnawing reality of the master's table. Scraps and scarcity, where the very food meant to sustain you becomes another symbol of your low status, a constant battle against hunger and nutritional deprivation. Your meals, if you're lucky enough to have a dedicated servants' hall, are served in a separate, often unheated room. More commonly, especially for junior staff, you might eat standing in the kitchen or wherever you can grab a moment. The food itself is a stark contrast to the feast laid out for the family. While the family eats roast beef, you might get the fatty trimmings or the tough, less desirable cuts. While they enjoy fresh salmon, you might be given heavily salted, dried fish that's difficult to chew and even harder to digest. The emphasis is on cheapness, bulk, and utility, not on flavor, variety, or nutrition like the balanced, diverse meals you might find prepared in a modern cafeteria in a thriving tech company in Seattle. Washington. A typical meal might consist of a large quantity of bread, often stale or hardtack, perhaps some thin gruel made from oats or barley, and, if you're fortunate, a small portion of salted pork or beef. Fresh vegetables and fruits, crucial sources of vitamins, are rare luxuries, especially in winter. Potatoes might make an appearance, but their preparation is often basic and repetitive. Imagine eating the same bland, heavy, and uninspiring meal, day in and day out, for weeks, months, or even years. The monotony itself is a form of torture, leading to a loss of appetite and a profound sense of deprivation. It's like being forced to eat plain oatmeal for every single meal, every day, forever. Even if you loved oatmeal at first, the joy would quickly vanish. The quality of the food is often poor. Meat, when available, is heavily salted to preserve it, making it incredibly tough and often causing excessive thirst. Vegetables might be overcooked to the point of nutrient destruction, or simply limp and unappetizing. Milk might be watered down and butter might be rancid. There's no rigorous food safety inspection like the kind you'd expect from the USDA today for food sold in a grocery store in Houston. Texas. Contamination is a constant risk. You learn to eat quickly, to swallow down whatever is offered, because going hungry is the only alternative. A common historical truth is that Victorian servants' diets were typically low in fresh produce, high in starchy staples, and often consisted of leftover or low-quality cuts of meat, reflecting both economic necessity and the prevailing belief that servants did not require the same nutritional standards as their employers. This often led to widespread nutritional deficiencies among the servant class. Historians still widely debate the precise long-term health consequences of such monotonous and inadequate diets on specific servant populations. As detailed dietary records for individual servants are rare, making it challenging to conduct comprehensive nutritional analyses across the diverse range of households and regions. The concept of scraps is a grim reality. Often, the servants' hall receives the leftovers from the family's table. While this might occasionally mean a taste of a richer dish, it also means food that is cold, congealed, or less palatable. It also reinforces the idea that you are secondary, receiving what the family no longer desires, rather than fresh prepared meals designed for your sustenance. This constant reminder of your subordinate status, even in something as fundamental as food, is a quiet erosion of dignity. It's a bit like being a scavenger, always waiting for the crumbs to fall from the table, and feeling grateful for them, no matter how unappetizing. The meager portions, combined with the immense physical labor of the unseen army. Endless toil, remember that relentless exertion from Chapter 1, mean that servants are often chronically underfed. You burn far more calories than you consume, leading to a constant state of hunger and a pervasive feeling of weakness. Your body, deprived of sufficient energy, begins to consume its own reserves, leading to muscle loss and overall debilitation. This isn't just about feeling hungry, it's about your body slowly wasting away, making you more susceptible to illness and less capable of performing your duties effectively. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about the master's table scraps and scarcity is the curious phenomenon of the tea leaf black market, where resourceful kitchen or housemaids would subtly collect discarded tea leaves from the family's teapots, dry them, and then discreetly sell or trade them to other servants or even local impoverished families. As tea was an expensive luxury, turning waste into a tiny, unofficial source of income or a rare treat, a testament to their desperate ingenuity in extracting value from the remnants of their employer's indulgence. Imagine yourself, a resourceful housemaid in a grand New England manor in autumn, carefully scraping the soggy tea leaves from the family's elegant porcelain teacups, knowing that these seemingly worthless discards, once dried and repurposed, could be bartered for a new thimble or a precious hour of conversation with a friendly, stable hand, a truly ingenious, if slightly illicit, form of resource management. It truly sucked to realize that your daily ritual of tea making for the family created a valuable byproduct that you couldn't openly enjoy, forcing you into a secret, tiny economy. Nutritional deficiencies are rampant. Without fresh fruits and vegetables, scurvy becomes a real threat, making your gums bleed, your teeth loosen, and old wounds reopen. Without enough protein, your muscles waste away, and you feel perpetually weak. Without enough iron, you develop anemia, leading to constant fatigue and a pale complexion. These deficiencies don't just make you uncomfortable, they actively undermine your immune system, making you highly vulnerable to every disease that sweeps through the close quarters of the servants' hall. The very food meant to keep you alive is, ironically, slowly killing you, a hidden enemy within your daily sustenance. This makes even minor ailments, which we'll explore in the next chapter, much more dangerous. The psychological impact of such a meager diet is also profound. Food is more than just fuel. It's comfort, pleasure, and a symbol of care. To be constantly deprived, to watch others feast while you subsist on scraps, is deeply demoralizing. It fosters resentment, a sense of injustice, and a perpetual feeling of being undervalued. The act of eating, which should be a moment of respite, becomes another stark reminder of your position at the bottom of the social ladder. This constant hunger, both physical and emotional, contributes to a pervasive sense of despair that colors every aspect of your arduous life. Even the rituals around food reinforce the hierarchy. You eat quickly, silently, and often standing, while the family dines in leisure, engaging in conversation. There's no lingering over a meal, no savoring of flavors, no communal enjoyment. It's a purely functional act, performed as quickly as possible so you can return to your duties. The contrast is stark. A daily humiliation that reinforces your status as an unthinking laborer rather than a valued human being. The scarcity isn't always just about portion sizes. It's about reliability. Sometimes due to poor harvests, bad weather, or logistical failures, a constant struggle for anyone managing supplies. Similar to the leadership's grim struggle we discussed in Chapter 7, even the meager rations might be delayed or unavailable. This means periods of true hunger, where you go without proper meals for days, relying on sheer willpower and whatever small, hidden reserves of food you might have secretly hoarded. This adds another layer of anxiety to an already precarious existence. The enduring legacy of the master's table scraps and scarcity is a stark reminder of the fundamental inequalities that defined the Victorian era. It highlights how access to basic necessities like food was deeply stratified by class, and how this stratification directly impacted health, well-being, and even life expectancy. This historical reality underscores the importance of modern food safety regulations, nutritional science, and humanitarian efforts that strive to ensure food security for all, whether you're enjoying a gourmet meal in a five-star restaurant in New Orleans, Louisiana, or simply buying affordable, nutritious groceries at your local supermarket in Des Moines, Iowa. The silent hunger of countless servants helped to pave the way for a world where such widespread deprivation is no longer an accepted norm. Transforming a painful past into a more mindful present, let's gently return from the gnawing hunger and monotonous meals of the master's table scraps and scarcity, where every morsel served reinforced the servant's low standing. If Chapter 5 explored the silent deprivation of food, tonight we'll delve into an even more insidious, often invisible enemy, the pervasive illness that relentlessly stalked the servants' quarters. We're going to explore the grim reality of the unseen illness, disease, and despair, where cramped conditions, poor nutrition, constant fatigue, and a lack of proper medical care conspired to make sickness a common, and often fatal companion. Imagine yourself now, a young hall boy perhaps, in a grand Victorian mansion in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, or a stately residence on Commonwealth Avenue in Boston, Massachusetts. You wake one morning with a pounding headache and a persistent cough, or perhaps a strange rash has appeared on your arms. You try to push through it, to ignore the chills that ripple through your body, because taking a day off is simply not an option. Your work is relentless, your presence expected. This is the pervasive, terrifying reality of the unseen illness, disease, and despair, where your body, already weakened by endless toil and inadequate food, becomes a vulnerable host for every microbe that sweeps through the close quarters of the manor. The servants' quarters, as we explored in below-stairs confines. Cramped quarters, remember those tiny, unventilated rooms from Chapter 2, are ideal breeding grounds for disease. Dozens of people are crammed into small, damp spaces, sharing beds, breathing stale air. The lack of proper sanitation means that waste is often poorly managed, attracting rats and flies and spreading pathogens. Water sources, even if nominally clean for the family upstairs, might become contaminated downstairs due to leaky pipes or improper handling. It's a literal petri dish, where diseases can spread with alarming speed and efficiency, far faster than gossip through a small town in rural Mississippi. Tuberculosis TB, often called consumption, is a silent killer that stalks these close quarters. Imagine a cough that lingers for weeks, then months, growing deeper, more rattling. You might lose weight, feel perpetually tired, and experience night sweats. In the damp, unventilated conditions of the servants' hall, where one infected person coughs and sneezes, the airborne bacteria spread effortlessly. Once one servant contracts it, it's only a matter of time before others follow. There's no diagnostic test, no effective treatment, no antibiotics like the ones you might take for a common infection today in your local clinic in Los Angeles. California, the illness slowly consumes you, leaving you weak, emaciated, and eventually, and if you're lucky, sent home to die or worse, succumbing in the cold, impersonal infirmary. If the manor even has one, typhus and typhoid fever are also rampant, especially in environments where cleanliness is lacking and human waste is poorly managed. These fevers cause high temperatures, severe headaches, rashes, and extreme weakness. Typhus, often spread by lice, those unwelcome companions we briefly mentioned in Chapter 2, can decimate an entire household, indiscriminately striking down both servants and sometimes even the family members. Typhoid, spread through contaminated food and water, turns every meal and every sip of water into a dangerous gamble. Imagine trying to perform your duties, to carry heavy trays or scrub endless floors, when your body is racked with a debilitating fever, your muscles aching, and your mind clouded with delirium. It's like trying to run a marathon with a severe case of the flu, a truly impossible task. A common historical truth is that infectious diseases like tuberculosis, typhus, and typhoid fever were rampant in Victorian-era society, particularly among the working classes and servants, due to poor sanitation, cramped living conditions, and inadequate nutrition. These diseases were often far more lethal than accidents or injuries, claiming a disproportionate number of lives and significantly impacting the operational capacity of households. Historians still widely debate the precise mortality rates of specific diseases among servant populations due to incomplete record-keeping and diagnostic ambiguities, making it challenging to quantify the full scope of this historical health burden with absolute certainty. Influenza and common colds, while less lethal than TB or typhoid, are still debilitating. When an entire house staff is constantly exhausted from the unseen army, endless toil, remember Chapter 1, and undernourished from the master's table? Scraps and scarcity, the grim details from Chapter 5. Their immune systems are severely compromised. A simple cold can drag on for weeks, turning into bronchitis or pneumonia, leaving you gasping for breath and too weak to lift a duster. There's no paid sick leave, no remote work option like the flexibility you might have in a modern office job in New York City. You are expected to work through your illness, pushing your body to its absolute limits, often making your condition worse and exposing your colleagues to contagion. It's a bit like being a professional athlete who has to play every game, even with a severe injury. Knowing your career depends on it, the psychological toll of constant illness, both your own and that of your colleagues, is immense. You live with the perpetual fear of falling ill, knowing that sickness could mean not only suffering, but also loss of employment and utter destitution. You see your friends and colleagues sicken, perhaps die or be sent away, never to return. This creates a pervasive sense of despair and helplessness, a chilling reminder of your own vulnerability. The manor, despite its grandeur, becomes a cage where death is a constant, unseen guest. Even minor ailments become serious problems. A cut finger from a broken dish, a burn from the stove, or a persistent cough. These are often ignored due to lack of time or access to proper care. Without antiseptics, a concept largely unknown or unused in most homes, or proper wound dressing, a simple cut can become infected, festering into a painful, debilitating abscess, potentially leading to blood poisoning sepsis, a common cause of death in that era. There's no trip to urgent care or a pharmacy for antibiotics like the convenience you experience today in your suburb in Chicago. Illinois. You might receive a crude poultice from the housekeeper or a superstitious charm from an older colleague, but effective medical intervention is rare. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed detail about the unseen illness. Disease and despair is the curious phenomenon of the servant's silent infirmary, where sick or dying servants, too ill to work but not yet dismissed, would often be quietly moved to a remote, unused room in the manor, like a disused storeroom or a cold attic space, to suffer in isolation, far from the family's eyes and ears, ensuring their suffering did not disturb the illusion of a perfectly run household, turning their final days into a hidden, often lonely, ordeal. Imagine yourself racked with fever, being gently but firmly guided to a dusty, unheated room in the furthest reaches of a grand estate in rural Pennsylvania. The door clicking shut behind you, the faint sounds of the house continuing its bustling life above, utterly oblivious to your silent suffering, a truly grim form of practical, yet utterly uncompassionate care. It truly sucked to be discarded and hidden away in your most vulnerable moments. Dying alone in the dark, the stress of the silent service, strict hierarchy, Chapter 3 and the physical demands of the unseen army, endless toil. Chapter 1 further compromise the immune system, chronic fatigue, emotional repression, and constant anxiety weaken your body's natural defenses, making you even more susceptible to every passing contagion. It's a vicious cycle where the very conditions of your labor actively undermine your ability to stay healthy, trapping you in a cycle of weakness and vulnerability. Child mortality among servant children. If a servant was even allowed to keep a child with them, a rare occurrence for most domestic positions, was particularly high. These children, often born into the same squalid conditions, were incredibly vulnerable to childhood diseases like measles, scarlet fever, and whooping cough. Diseases that are largely eradicated or easily treatable today thanks to modern medicine and public health initiatives. The grief of losing a child, compounded by the inability to properly care for them or mourn openly due to the demands of service, added another layer of profound despair. Even if you managed to survive an illness, the recovery was often slow and incomplete. There was no proper convalescence, no time to fully regain your strength. You were expected back to work as soon as you could stand, often pushed beyond your limits, making you more prone to relapse or lingering weakness. Your body simply never fully recovered, carrying the scars of past illnesses, a constant reminder of the fragility of your health. The story of the unseen illness, disease, and despair is a chilling reminder of how profoundly our health is impacted by our living conditions, our nutrition, and our access to care. The high mortality rates and chronic suffering among Victorian servants were not just random occurrences. They were a direct consequence of a social system that prioritized opulence and convenience for a few at the expense of the basic human dignity and well-being of many. The desperate fight against these unseen enemies in the close quarters of the manor house helped, in time, to highlight the critical need for public health reforms that would eventually benefit all of society. So, as you lay in your own comfortable, clean bed tonight, breathing easily, perhaps feeling a minor sniffle that you know will pass, take a moment to reflect on the immense privilege of modern healthcare and sanitation, the absence of pervasive disease, the availability of clean water and good food, The quiet confidence in modern medicine, these are direct legacies of centuries of grim struggle against the unseen illness. Rest well, knowing that countless silent battles were fought and lost, so that you might live in a world where disease is largely a problem to be solved, not a constant, terrifying companion. Let's gently return from the grim, often fatal, reality of the unseen illness, disease, and despair, where sickness was a constant, debilitating companion in the cramped quarters below stairs. If Chapter 6 explored the physical toll of illness, tonight we'll delve into an even deeper, more insidious form of suffering. The systematic suppression of emotion and the profound lack of personal space. We're going to explore the heartbreaking reality of no time for tears emotional repression, where the demands of service force servants to bury their true feelings, to maintain an impenetrable facade of calm efficiency, turning their inner lives into a hidden landscape of unspoken pain and quiet desperation. Imagine yourself now, a lady's maid, perhaps in a grand Victorian mansion on Fifth Avenue in New York City, or a stately southern plantation house near Richmond. Virginia, your mistress is weeping inconsolably over a minor social slight or a broken piece of jewelry. You stand silently by, offering a handkerchief, a glass of water, and soothing words, your face a mask of sympathy. Yet, inside, your own heart might be aching from a letter just received, bringing news of a sick parent back in your humble village in rural Ohio, or a distant loved one who has passed away. You cannot show your pain. You cannot shed a tear. You cannot reveal any emotion that might detract from the family's comfort or expose your personal vulnerability. This is the pervasive, soul-crushing reality of no time for tears. Emotional repression, where your feelings are a liability, your true self a secret kept hidden, and your dignity resides in your unwavering, silent performance. The very nature of domestic service demanded an almost theatrical performance of impassivity. From the moment you woke, through the endless toil of the unseen army. Endless toil, remember, that relentless physical strain from Chapter 1. And within the rigid confines of the silent service strict hierarchy, the social pyramid we explored in Chapter 3, you were expected to be a blank slate. Your expression had to be neutral, polite, and attentive, never betraying boredom, fatigue, resentment, or personal distress. Any visible emotion, especially a negative one, was considered a sign of insubordination, a breach of decorum, or a lack of proper training. It's like being a highly skilled robot, programmed only for service, with no capacity for personal feelings. A truly unnatural way to live. This expectation extended to every interaction. When the master roared in anger, you remained still, silent, your gaze lowered. When the mistress complained about a triviality, you listened with a sympathetic, yet utterly detached expression. Even joyous occasions, like a family celebration or a wedding, required you to maintain your professional distance, to serve without participating, to observe without reacting. You were always an outsider, an observer, never a participant in the emotional life of the household you served. The lack of privacy, which we discussed in below stairs confines, cramped quarters, those cramped shared rooms from Chapter 2, made emotional repression even more challenging. With no personal space, no quiet corner to retreat to, you had to maintain your facade even among your fellow servants. While there might be moments of shared commiseration and hushed whispers, true emotional release was rare and risky. One never knew who might be listening, or who might use your vulnerability against you in the complex web of servant politics. This constant vigilance, this inability to truly let down your guard, was profoundly exhausting. It's like living in a perpetual audition, where your performance must be flawless, and any sign of weakness could lead to your immediate dismissal. A common historical truth is that Victorian domestic service demanded rigorous emotional labor from its staff, requiring them to suppress personal feelings and maintain an impassive, deferential demeanor at all times, regardless of their internal state or the circumstances of their own lives. This emotional repression was a key component of the expected professionalism and contributed significantly to the psychological burden of servitude. Historians still widely debate the long-term psychological consequences of such enforced emotional suppression on the mental health and well-being of individual servants. As direct testimonies detailing these inner struggles are exceedingly rare, making it challenging to fully grasp the profound, invisible scars left by this constant self-censorship. Grief was a particularly difficult emotion to manage. If a loved one died, perhaps a parent or a sibling back home in a distant town in rural Tennessee, you might receive the devastating news in a curt letter. You would feel a crushing weight of sadness, a profound sense of loss. Yet you had to continue with your duties, serving tea, polishing silver, as if nothing had happened. There was no time for mourning, no space for tears, no permission to express your grief. To break down, to show such weakness, could jeopardize your position. The unspoken rule was clear: your personal life, your personal pain, had no place in the service of the household. It's like attending a funeral while simultaneously having to cater the reception, never allowed to shed a tear for the deceased. A truly inhumane expectation. Similarly, anger and frustration. Inevitable emotions when dealing with demanding employers or difficult colleagues had to be ruthlessly suppressed. The injustice of meager wages, remember those paltry sums from Chapter 4, or the endless cycle of the unseen illness. Chapter 6 might fill you with rage, but it had to be buried deep. Any outburst, any disrespectful word, any open display of discontent meant instant dismissal and a ruined reputation, making it impossible to find future work. This constant bottling up of powerful emotions created immense internal pressure, leading to chronic stress and often physical ailments, as the body bore the burden that the mind could not express. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed detail about No Time for Tears. Emotional repression is the curious phenomenon of the servant's silent sigh, a barely audible, almost involuntary exhalation of breath, often performed when alone or among trusted peers in the dark corners below stairs. Serving as a tiny, momentary release of pent-up emotional exhaustion or frustration, a subtle act of resistance against the relentless demand for impassivity, and a shared, unspoken acknowledgement of their collective burden. Imagine yourself exhausted, alone for a rare moment in the vast, cold pantry of a mansion on the coast of Maine, letting out a soft, almost imperceptible sigh, feeling the immediate, albeit fleeting, relief of a tiny, permissible rebellion against the overwhelming weight of suppressed emotion. A truly poignant expression of human vulnerability. It truly sucked to have to find such a minuscule, hidden way to express your profound weariness, where even a simple breath became a subversive act. Love and affection were equally complicated. While some servants might form genuine bonds with colleagues or even find love a rare triumph, often requiring discretion and secrecy, any open display of affection was frowned upon. If you fell in love with a fellow servant, it had to be kept hidden, as a public relationship could be seen as unprofessional or a distraction from duty. For those with families outside the manor, visits were rare, letters were precious, and physical displays of affection were almost non-existent. You were expected to detach yourself from personal ties, to give your entire being to the service of the house. Even personal ambitions or dreams had to be carefully concealed. To express a desire for a different life, to show ambition beyond your current station, was often met with ridicule or dismissal. The rigid social hierarchy allowed little room for upward mobility, and any yearning for something more was seen as a threat to the established order. You were expected to be content with your lot, to embrace your role, and to suppress any aspirations that might disrupt the smooth functioning of the household. This constant emotional masquerade inevitably led to profound psychological distress. Chronic stress, anxiety, and depression were undoubtedly common, though rarely acknowledged or recorded in historical documents. Servants would suffer in silence, their inner turmoil masked by polite smiles and efficient movements. The lack of emotional outlets, the inability to process trauma or grief, And the constant pressure to conform to an unnatural standard of stoicism created a fertile ground for mental anguish. It's a silent, invisible epidemic of the soul, far more widespread than any physical ailment. A constant gnawing at the spirit that would make a modern therapist in California gasp. The consequences of this repression were often physical. Unexpressed stress can manifest as headaches, digestive issues, chronic pain, and a weakened immune system, exacerbating the vulnerability to the unseen illness. Chapter 6. The body bore the burden of the emotions the mind could not release. Turning the self into a silent battleground, the legacy of no time for tears. Emotional repression is a stark reminder of the dehumanizing aspects of extreme social stratification and exploitative labor. It highlights how powerful social norms can dictate not only outward behavior, but also the very internal experience of individuals. This historical reality underscores the importance of mental health awareness, the right to emotional expression, and the value of personal space and autonomy in modern society. Whether you're working in a bustling office in Chicago, Illinois, or managing a quiet household in rural Oregon, the silent suffering of countless Victorian servants, forced to bury their tears, played an unseen role in shaping our understanding of human dignity and the fundamental right to feel, to mourn, and to simply be ourselves. Let's gently return from the suffocating, silent world of no time for tears. Emotional repression, where feelings were a forbidden luxury, carefully concealed beneath a mask of professional impassivity. If Chapter 7 explored the internal burden of suppression, tonight we'll delve into the fascinating, often surprising, ways servants found to reclaim tiny fragments of their autonomy. Despite the pervasive control, we're going to explore the quiet defiance of whispers of rebellion, covert resistance, where small, often unseen acts of subversion allowed individuals to assert their humanity in a system designed to strip it away, turning mundane chores into miniature acts of quiet revolution. Imagine yourself now, a young kitchen maid in a sprawling Victorian mansion in Saratoga Springs, New York, or a grand estate overlooking the rolling hills of Kentucky. You are endlessly scrubbing pots, your hands raw, your back aching. The cook, a formidable tyrant, has just snapped at you for a minor mistake, her words sharp and demeaning. You can't talk back. You can't argue. But as you scour a stubborn pot, you might, ever so slightly, scrub a little harder than necessary, making a faint, deliberate scraping sound that only you can hear. A tiny act of aggression that goes unnoticed. A private release of your simmering frustration. This is the pervasive, subtle reality of whispers of rebellion. Covert resistance, where dignity is salvaged in the smallest, most imperceptible acts. And conformity is sometimes merely a facade for a deeper, quiet defiance. One of the most common forms of covert resistance was slacking, not outright refusing to work, which would lead to immediate dismissal, but finding tiny ways to slow down, to prolong a task, or to exert just a little less effort than demanded. Perhaps you sweep the stairs slightly slower when no one is watching, or spend an extra minute polishing a piece of silver, simply to extend a brief moment of quiet thought. These are not acts of laziness, but deliberate, albeit subtle. Rebellions against the relentless pace of the unseen army. Endless toil, remember that brutal schedule from Chapter 1. It's like a tiny, unspoken strike, where the tools of labor become instruments of quiet protest. Imagine being a factory worker on an assembly line in 1920s Detroit, Michigan, subtly adjusting your pace by just a fraction, knowing it won't be noticed, but feeling a tiny spark of freedom. Another potent form of covert resistance was gossip and rumor. While dangerous if discovered, the sharing of whispered secrets and grievances was a vital psychological outlet. In the cramped quarters of below-stairs confines, those tiny shared rooms from Chapter 2, servants would often share unflattering stories about the family, mock their eccentricities, or vent their frustrations about senior staff. This communal act of talking back in secret, of subverting the rigid rules of the silent service Chapter 3, through shared scorn, created a sense of solidarity and allowed for a release of pent-up anger and resentment. These whispers were a powerful, albeit informal, communication network, creating a shared understanding of their collective plight. It's like a secret social media group, where everyone can vent about their terrible boss, but without any digital footprint. A common historical truth is that despite the rigid control and punitive environment within Victorian domestic service, servants frequently engaged in various forms of covert resistance, ranging from subtle acts of defiance like slacking or petty theft, to the more impactful spread of gossip and information. These actions, while rarely leading to overt rebellion, served as crucial mechanisms for psychological survival and the preservation of individual agency within an otherwise oppressive system. Historians still widely debate the true extent to which these individual acts of resistance were conscious, collective efforts towards systemic change, or primarily isolated coping mechanisms for personal survival, as their inherent covert nature makes conclusive evidence difficult to ascertain. Petty theft was another widespread, albeit desperate, form of resistance. Given the meager wages, remember that pittance from Chapter 4 and the scarcity of food, the grim meals from Chapter 5? Taking small items for personal use was common. A piece of leftover food, a candle stub, a discarded ribbon, or even a lump of coal. These were not grand thefts, but small acts of appropriation, reclaiming what was implicitly denied. This wasn't always driven by malicious intent, but often by sheer necessity, or a subtle sense of entitlement given the immense labor they performed for so little compensation. It was a silent argument against the unfairness of their economic reality, a way of balancing the scales, however slightly. Imagine taking a few extra sugar packets from a coffee shop, not because you need them, but because you feel entitled to a little extra sweetness in a bland existence. Information control was a surprisingly powerful form of covert resistance. Servants, particularly those in senior positions like valets or ladies' maids, were privy to an immense amount of personal information about the family, their arguments, their secrets, their debts, their indiscretions. This knowledge was a hidden currency. While rarely used overtly, the knowing glance, the subtle omission of details, or the strategic sharing of information with trusted colleagues could be a powerful, unspoken manipulation of their employers. They held the power to disrupt the family's carefully constructed public image, a silent threat that underscored their unexpected influence. However rarely it was overtly deployed. It's like being a hacker who gains access to sensitive data, but chooses only to use small bits of it for personal advantage, never revealing the full extent of their access. The creation of informal networks among servants, both within a single manor and between different households, was another vital form of resistance. These networks, built on trust and shared experience, provided a sense of community and mutual support that was often denied by the formal hierarchy. They shared job leads, gave advice, offered comfort, and sometimes even provided a safe haven for a dismissed colleague. These were underground railroads of empathy and solidarity, helping individuals survive the isolation and harshness of their lives. It's like a secret union forming in the shadows, not to strike, but simply to exist and survive together. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed detail about whispers of rebellion. Covert resistance is the curious phenomenon of the forgotten ingredient, where a frustrated or subtly rebellious kitchen maid, when particularly aggrieved, might accidentally omit a minor, non-essential, but subtly important ingredient from a family's dish, making it just slightly bland or less perfect. A tiny, undetectable act of culinary sabotage that would go completely unnoticed by the diners, but serve as a profound, private act of defiance and a silent, internal scream of frustration against the demands of the day. Imagine yourself a furious cook in a grand manor in suburban Maryland, having been subjected to a particularly insulting comment from the master, discreetly leaving out a pinch of nutmeg from his favorite custard, knowing that the slight alteration will be completely imperceptible to him, but feeling a powerful surge of quiet satisfaction at your unseen act of culinary insubordination? It truly sucked to have your only outlet for rage be to slightly alter a recipe. Turning a perfect dish into a subtle act of rebellion. Feigning ignorance or clumsiness was a subtle art of resistance. A servant might misunderstand an overly complex instruction, or accidentally break a minor, inexpensive item. This could result in a scolding, but it also slowed down the work, frustrated the employer, and provided a brief respite from constant perfection. It was a way of pushing back against impossible demands, a passive-aggressive act that allowed a servant to momentarily assert control over their own pace and efficiency, even if it risked reprimand. It's like a child deliberately mishearing their parents to buy themselves an extra few minutes of playtime. But with much higher stakes, the spread of information about better positions or kinder employers was a highly practical form of covert resistance. Servants would constantly share whispers about job openings, about houses with better food, less demanding mistresses, or even slightly higher wages. This informal job network was crucial for survival and improvement, allowing servants to escape truly unbearable situations. This was an act of quiet solidarity, helping fellow sufferers to find a path out of their misery, even if it was just to another, slightly less miserable position. The psychological impact of these acts of covert resistance, however small, was immense. They provided a crucial outlet for frustration, a means of preserving a shred of dignity and agency in a life largely devoid of it. These quiet acts of defiance, though unseen and unacknowledged by the powerful, were essential for maintaining sanity and a sense of self in an oppressive system. They were tiny victories in a war where outright rebellion was impossible, allowing servants to assert their humanity in the face of constant dehumanization. This subtle, pervasive undercurrent of whispers of rebellion. Covert resistance tells a powerful story about the resilience of the human spirit. It shows that even in the most controlled and seemingly powerless environments, individuals will find ways to push back, to assert their will, and to reclaim fragments of their autonomy. These acts of quiet defiance, though rarely recorded in official histories, were the silent heartbeats of a hidden struggle, a testament to the enduring human desire for freedom and dignity, no matter how small the expression. The legacy of these whispered rebellions reminds us that even when voices are silenced, the human spirit finds a way to resist, to adapt, and to quietly, persistently, demand its due. Whether you're observing a contemporary labor dispute in a factory in South Carolina, or considering the subtle forms of resistance in any modern, highly structured environment, let's gently return from the subtle, yet powerful world of whispers of rebellion, covert resistance, where tiny acts of defiance allowed servants to reclaim fragments of their dignity in a stifling environment. If Chapter 8 explored the quiet ways they pushed back, tonight we'll delve into their deepest longings, the fervent hopes that kept them going amidst the endless toil and emotional repression. We're going to explore the poignant reality of beyond the gates dreams of freedom, where the aspirations for a life beyond servitude, however distant or unattainable, fueled their spirits and shaped their meager futures. Imagine yourself now, a young kitchen maid, perhaps in a grand Victorian manor in the rolling countryside of Maryland, or a bustling urban townhouse in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's a rare Sunday afternoon, your only time off. You might be walking with a trusted friend, or perhaps alone, down a dusty country lane or a busy city street, just outside the imposing gates of the manor. As you gaze at the horizon or at the passing carriages filled with free citizens, your mind drifts. You dream of a life where you don't answer to a bell, where your time is your own, where you can choose your own path. This is the pervasive, often heartbreaking, reality of beyond the gates. Dreams of freedom, where the hope for a different future, however slim, was a vital lifeline against the crushing weight of servitude. For many, the most immediate dream of freedom was simply to escape domestic service altogether. Imagine longing for a life where you didn't have to endure the unseen army. Endless toil. Remember that relentless physical strain from Chapter 1, or suffer the indignities of below-stairs confines. Those cramped, unsanitary rooms from Chapter 2. This might mean marrying and establishing your own home, however humble. For a female servant, marriage was often the only socially acceptable escape from perpetual servitude. You might dream of a husband who worked in a trade, a small cottage of your own, and the precious autonomy of managing your own household, even if it meant a life of continuous domestic labor. But at least it would be your labor, for your family, not for a demanding master or mistress. This dream was a beacon, offering the promise of independence and dignity. A simple dream that most modern Americans take for granted as they plan their own futures and relationships in cities like Denver, Colorado, or Portland, Oregon. For others, particularly young men, the dream might involve emigration to America or the British colonies. The stories of opportunity, of vast lands and the chance to build a new life, often filtered back from across the Atlantic. Imagine hearing whispers of distant prairies in Nebraska, or booming cities like Chicago, Illinois, where a man could own his own land, or work in a factory with better wages and more freedom. This was a powerful lure, a vision of escaping the rigid class structure of Britain and finding true social mobility. The journey itself was arduous and expensive, often requiring years of saving the meager wages, remember that pittance from Chapter 4, but the hope of a fresh start, a chance to shed the stigma of servitude, one that was a compelling motivator. It's like dreaming of moving to Mars to start a new civilization. Except Mars is a real place, and you actually have a tiny chance of getting there. A common historical truth is that, for many Victorian domestic servants, escaping the confines of service through marriage, emigration, or transitioning to other forms of labor represented the primary pathways to personal freedom and upward social mobility. Despite the significant obstacles and financial limitations, these aspirations often stood in stark contrast to the realities of their daily lives, offering a vital source of psychological resilience. Historians still widely debate the precise success rates of servants who attempted to transition out of domestic service, as detailed follow-up records are scarce, making it challenging to quantify how many truly achieved their dreams of independence versus those who remained trapped in similar or worse forms of poverty. Some servants, especially those with specialized skills like cooks or valets, might dream of opening their own small businesses, a modest boarding house, a small shop, or a catering service. This required significant savings, something almost impossible on the scraps and scarcity of their diet. Chapter 5, and the burden of unseen illnesses. Chapter 6. But the vision of being their own master, of controlling their own labor and destiny, was a powerful driving force. It meant trading one form of hard work for another, but with the precious addition of autonomy and the potential for true financial independence. Imagine saving every single penny for decades, just to be able to open a tiny, independent coffee shop in a small town. A dream that would seem modest to a modern entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, California, but was monumental for them. The desire for education and self-improvement was another hidden dream for many. Despite often having little formal schooling, some servants yearned for knowledge. Imagine discreetly reading a borrowed book by the dim light of a candle in your cramped, shared room, or practicing writing letters in secret. The ability to read, to write, to understand the world beyond the manor walls was a form of intellectual freedom, a quiet rebellion against the mental stagnation of repetitive labor. It offered a glimpse of a different kind of life, one where your mind, not just your hands, was valued. This yearning for knowledge was a direct challenge to the emotional repression Chapter 7 they faced, allowing their minds to soar even when their bodies were confined. It's like secretly learning to code on a broken old computer, driven by the pure desire for knowledge, even when no one expects it of you. For others, the dream was simply to achieve respect and dignity, to be treated not as a tool, but as a human being. This might not involve grand escapes, but rather finding a position in a household where the employers were kinder, the senior staff less tyrannical, and the conditions slightly better. The goal was to find a place where their labor was acknowledged, and their individuality was not completely erased. This was a more subtle form of freedom, less about physical escape and more about reclaiming their inherent worth. Imagine leaving a toxic workplace in Boston, Massachusetts, for one that offers a respectful environment. Even if the pay isn't dramatically higher, it's a form of freedom in itself, a fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about Beyond the Gates. Dreams of Freedom is the curious phenomenon of the servant's silent savings bank, where, instead of traditional banks, trusted senior servants like housekeepers or butlers would sometimes discreetly hold small sums of money for junior staff, acting as informal, secretive treasurers, often keeping meticulous ledgers in hidden compartments, allowing younger servants to accumulate savings for emigration or marriage away from the prying eyes of the family or the temptations of their peers, turning loyalty into a vital, hidden financial network. Imagine yourself, a nervous young scullery maid in a sprawling mansion near Lake Michigan, carefully handing over a few saved shillings to the formidable but kind housekeeper, trusting her completely with your entire future. Knowing that this secret trust was the only way your dreams of a new life in New York City could ever become a reality. A truly poignant act of inner servant solidarity. It truly sucked to have to rely on an informal, vulnerable system to safeguard your meager hopes for a better future, where your savings could disappear with a change of staff. The realization of these dreams was incredibly difficult. The financial barriers were immense, requiring years of extreme frugality and often a network of support from family or sympathetic individuals. The social barriers were equally formidable. Changing one's social class was almost unheard of. A bad reference could ruin your chances, and the pervasive assumption was that once a servant, always a servant. This meant that for many, their dreams remained just that. Distant, tantalizing visions, never fully realized. Yet, these dreams were vital. They provided a psychological refuge, a source of hope in a relentlessly bleak existence. They allowed servants to mentally escape the confines of their daily lives, to imagine a future where they were masters of their own destiny, even if only for a fleeting moment. This ability to dream, to yearn for something more, was a profound act of human resilience, a quiet refusal to be entirely defined by their circumstances. It allowed them to endure the emotional repression. Chapter 7 and the covert resistance, Chapter 8, with a sense of purpose beyond mere survival. The paths to freedom, however narrow, did exist. Some servants did marry, did emigrate, did open small businesses. Their stories, often unrecorded in the grand narratives of history, are testaments to incredible perseverance. They were the ones who dared to dream beyond the gates, and sometimes, against all odds, managed to cross them into a new life. Their struggles and their triumphs, however small, illuminate the enduring human desire for autonomy and self-determination, the legacy of Beyond the Gates. Dreams of Freedom is a poignant reminder that even in the most oppressive systems, the human spirit yearns for something more. It highlights the power of hope, the driving force of aspiration, and the fundamental human right to self-determination. This historical reality underscores the importance of social mobility, educational opportunities, and economic justice in our modern world, ensuring that the dreams of freedom are not just for a privileged few, but for all. Whether you're building a new life in a bustling metropolis like Los Angeles, California, or seeking opportunity in a quiet rural town in Wisconsin, the unseen dreams of countless Victorian servants, yearning for a life beyond the manor, help to pave the way for a world where freedom, however imperfect, is an achievable reality for so many. Let's gently return from the profound, often heartbreaking, realm of Beyond the Gates dreams of freedom, where the faintest glimmer of a different future sustains spirits amidst a lifetime of servitude. If Chapter 9 explored their aspirations, tonight we'll finally step out of the shadows of the Victorian Manor and into our own lives, reflecting on how those grim realities silently shape the comfortable world we inhabit today. We're going to explore echoes and comfort modern gratitude, contemplating the quiet, unseen legacy of an era of immense hardship that underpins so many of the conveniences we now take for granted. From the clean water in our taps to the very notion of personal space, imagine yourself now, winding down your evening in your own home in suburban Virginia, or your cozy apartment in Seattle, Washington. The lights are soft. Perhaps a gentle hum of an air conditioner fills the room. You've had a long day. Perhaps a busy one at work, or a relaxed one at home. You might think nothing of it as you grab a glass of water from the tap, the clear liquid flowing effortlessly. You might take a warm shower, stepping into a stream of clean, purified water. You might open your refrigerator, filled with diverse, fresh food, or simply sink into a comfortable couch, knowing your time is your own, and no bell will summon you from your rest. This is the profound, yet often unacknowledged, reality of echoes in comfort modern gratitude, where the misery of a past life of servitude silently transformed the very fabric of our daily existence. Building a foundation of comfort we rarely pause to appreciate. Think back to the relentless, unending toil of the unseen army. Endless toil, our starting point in Chapter 1. Remember the grueling 16-hour days, the physical exhaustion, the constant scrubbing and polishing by hand? Now, look around your own home. Do you have a vacuum cleaner that glides effortlessly across carpets? A washing machine that handles soiled clothes with the push of a button? A dishwasher that cleans your dishes while you relax? These aren't just modern conveniences. They are direct descendants of the historical need to reduce manual labor, born from the recognition of the sheer, soul-crushing effort that once went into maintaining a clean home. Every automated appliance is a quiet monument to the countless servants whose hands ached from similar, far more arduous tasks. It's like having a team of invisible, tireless servants doing your bidding, without any of the human cost, a truly freeing advance. Consider the living conditions of below-stairs confines cramped quarters, that stifling reality from Chapter 2. Remember the tiny, unheated shared rooms, the lack of privacy, the pervasive dampness and pests. Now, appreciate your own bedroom. The personal space, the privacy, the warmth or coolness you can control, the clean air, and the absence of constant insect or rodent companions. Modern building codes, sanitation standards, and even the simple expectation of a private bathroom and personal sleeping space are legacies of a long, hard-won battle against the squalor that once defined the lives of millions. The very concept of a home as a private sanctuary, a place of rest and individual autonomy, rather than a mere utility space, is an echo of the desperate yearning for dignity that those servants possessed. The rigid social control of the silent service strict hierarchy. Chapter 3 comes into sharp relief when we consider our modern freedoms. You have the right to speak your mind, to express your emotions, to choose your friends, to pursue your own ambitions. The notion of being seen and not heard, of constantly deferring to authority, is largely foreign to most of us today, particularly in a democratic society. The modern workplace, while still having hierarchies, typically emphasizes open communication, professional boundaries, and the right to fair treatment. A stark contrast to the absolute power wielded by a Victorian butler or housekeeper. Your ability to simply be yourself without constant fear of reprisal for a stray thought or an unspoken emotion is a profound freedom that was denied to so many. It's a bit like living in a world where everyone has learned to speak, after centuries of forced silence, and the sheer joy of it is palpable. And the meager wages, that pathetic compensation from Chapter 4, and scraps and scarcity, the dismal food from Chapter 5. Think about your own financial autonomy. The ability to earn a living wage, to save money, to plan for retirement, to make choices about your career without fear of immediate destitution. Think about the abundance of food available in your local supermarket in a bustling city like Los Angeles, California, or a quiet town in Vermont. The variety, the freshness, the safety, and the sheer quantity. These are not just economic advancements, they are fundamental shifts in human dignity. built on the historical struggles against poverty and food insecurity. Every time you open your pantry or receive your paycheck, you are experiencing the hard-won victories that generations before you could only dream of. A common historical truth is that the cumulative hardships endured by domestic servants in the Victorian era, particularly the lack of personal autonomy, poor living conditions, and economic exploitation, inadvertently fueled the societal and technological advancements that ultimately led to improved standards of living and a greater emphasis on individual rights and public welfare in the modern era. These miserable lives served as a stark historical contrast that underscored the value of the comforts and freedoms we now possess. Historians still widely debate the precise causal link between the widespread suffering of domestic servants and specific public health or labor reforms, as social change is often a complex interplay of many factors. But the undeniable human cost certainly played a significant role in highlighting systemic injustices. The widespread illnesses of the unseen, illness, disease, and despair, our chilling exploration in Chapter 6 also cast a long shadow. Today, we have access to clean water, sophisticated sewage systems, and effective medical care. Vaccines protect us from diseases that once decimated populations. Antibiotics cure infections that were once fatal. The very concept of public health departments, of sanitation standards in restaurants, of widespread medical knowledge, these are direct legacies of a time when disease was an ever-present specter, driving desperate innovation to save lives. Whether in a crowded barracks or a stately manor, your relatively healthy existence, free from the constant fear of typhus or consumption, is a direct result of lessons learned from immense human suffering. Even the simple act of expressing your feelings, free from the crushing weight of no time for tears, emotional repression. Chapter 7 is a profound comfort. The ability to grieve, to laugh, to vent frustration, to show affection, these are fundamental aspects of human well-being. Modern society, increasingly aware of mental health, encourages emotional expression, a stark contrast to an era where such openness was a dangerous liability. The very freedom to be emotionally authentic, to connect genuinely with others, is a testament to how far we've come. It's like discovering you can finally breathe deeply after holding your breath for 100 years. A fascinating, yet rarely discussed, detail about echoes and comfort modern gratitude is the curious phenomenon of the phantom bell, where, even in retirement or after leaving service, many former Victorian servants reported still hearing or reacting to the subtle, unspoken cues of the manor bell, or the imperceptible movements of their former employers, a lingering neurological imprint of years of hypervigilance and conditioned response. Turning the silence of their new freedom into a subtle, haunting reminder of their past servitude. Imagine yourself an elderly former housemaid, now living in a small cottage in rural Iowa, suddenly flinching slightly at the distant chime of a church bell, your body momentarily tensing, as if expecting to be summoned for duty. A truly poignant testament to the deep, almost subconscious impact of a life lived under constant command. Truly sucked to have the very peace you earned be punctuated by the ghostly echoes of your past toil. A reminder that some scars run deeper than visible wounds. The small acts of whispers of rebellion. Covert resistance, Chapter 8, also resonate. While we have formal means of protest and labor rights today, the underlying human desire for agency and dignity remains. The impulse to subtly push back against unfairness, to find a voice even when silenced, is an inherent part of the human spirit. Their tiny rebellions, though unseen by their masters, were the silent seeds of a future where overt forms of resistance, like labor unions and civil rights movements, could eventually bloom. And finally, the dreams of freedom. Chapter 9. The yearning beyond the gates. Your ability to choose your own career, to marry whom you please, to travel, to pursue an education, to build your own home, to define your own destiny. These are the very freedoms that countless servants yearned for, and often died without ever experiencing. The ease with which we pursue our aspirations, the open paths before us, are not accidents of history. They are the hard-won dividends of generations who struggled against systems of oppression, whose quiet dreams fueled a persistent, incremental push towards a more just and equitable world. So, as you lay in your own bed tonight, surrounded by the myriad comforts and freedoms of your modern life, take a moment to breathe deeply, to feel the softness of your sheets, the warmth of your home, the quiet hum of your appliances. These aren't just material possessions. They are echoes. Echoes of silent labor, of cramped quarters, of hidden tears, of meager meals, and of profound, persistent dreams. They are the quiet legacy of the miserable life of a servant in a Victorian manor. Let this understanding wash over you. Feel the quiet hum of your modern world, a world built on the foundations laid by countless, often unseen, acts of perseverance and sacrifice from those who came before. Rest easy, knowing that while the human journey is complex and often arduous, the spirit of adaptation and of resilience, even in its most disturbing forms, is an ancient, powerful part of who we are. It's the hidden strength that binds us to our ancestors, a gentle reminder that even in the darkest corners of history, human ingenuity and will always find a way to leave their indelible, yet often unseen, mark.